Fear is a negative and unpleasant feeling. Would anyone want to experience it over and over again? Cassandra and her twin brother Rob were the exception. As young children, they couldn't go a day without the scary stories they liked to tell each other in a room with the lights off. Rob was a natural storyteller, or at least he thought he was. Cassandra would scream at every story he told, and he, playing the brave though small man, would sprawl on his bed mumbling, "You can't even scare the neighbor's little Joey with stories like that. No, scary stories are not your thing." They also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together, and while watching it, they argued over which of the characters in the story would turn out to be a ghost or a vampire in disguise. Cassandra's intuitive guesses were often ahead of her brother, and then he was nervous. Their mother, Mary Smith, although she did not share the passion of the twins, but to instill in her children a love of reading, bought them books by Robert Wall. Love for scary stories was not a childhood hobby, but a passion that brother and sister carried through life. They even collected figurines of villains, and as adults, seriously considered opening a themed store associated with this culture of horror. An interest in horror movies brought Cassandra to the set in 2004. She got a cameo in a scary movie that, although it didn't become popular, still caused a storm of envy in Rob, and he started asking his sister to make a deal for him. "You must have made some acquaintances there, right? I'm ready to play any one. Well, talk, CAs, please." "I'm pretty close with the head of the cast. Maybe something will come out of it, but no promises. I got the part by accident myself, after all." Cassandra replied. Roby was very happy, but to play, albeit in an episodic role, he was not able to. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, and on the set between him and debuting actress flashed a spark. To make the first step, each of them did not dare. That all changed during a corporate Halloween party. Cassandra dressed up as Velma from Scooby-Doo, and Colin dressed up as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. And if for Cassandra, the image of the cartoon character was just an image, then, for Colin Dudley, it seemed, he was something more. He was walking with a glass of milk all evening, looking at everyone with a glare just as his character did in the movie, and also, he talked a lot of quotes from the book. For example, looking at Cassandra with delight, he said, "Beauty invariably caused my only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into our ugly world." Cassandra thought it was a compliment, and they soon began dating, but their relationship didn't last long, only a couple months. Colin found another actress, Rebecca, and started dating her, and later on the couple started living together. August 25th, 2020. Cassandra Cantrell disappeared. She, without warning anyone, drove her car away from home in an unknown direction and did not answer phone calls. The police officers were very reluctant to take a report from her mother for a very long time, trying to calm the poor woman down and saying that sometimes children grow up and don't always warn their parents when they go out with friends. But Mary Smith was sure that something terrible had happened, and maybe if the lazy cops would finally start working, she would still have a chance to see her daughter alive. The search for Cassandra did not begin until 2 days later, and on the third day, the police found her car under a bridge, not in the most favorable area. Also, to add to the bad news, the car was unlocked, and the keys were inside. It was impossible to understand what Cassandra was doing here. This place was considered a neighborhood of homeless people, where with frequent frequency the police found their bodies, killed in a domestic fight, or died of an overdose of illegal drugs. The officers had to go around the neighborhood, questioning a lot of homeless people who, at the sight of the police, tried to get away for a while, but it was all to no avail. None of them had seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car showed up here. It was hard to expect anything else from the residents who lived under the bridge and drank alcohol all day long. The detective involved in the search for Cassandra had requested her cell phone billing, as he was instructed to do, but from experience he was sure it would get him nowhere. So it did. The signal showed that the phone was in the nearest body of water to the bridge, which meant that the detectives would not be able to recover it and get the information they needed. Nevertheless, a team of divers began searching the coastal area, and before they did so, standing on the shore, they picked up rocks from the ground and threw them into the water, testing how far they could throw the phone. Cassandra's mother said that her missing daughter's phone case was decorated with rhinestones, which meant it would not be difficult to find. Indeed, the phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not in the water. This was presented to her mother as good news, but the poor woman did not feel any better. She seemed to have gotten used to the idea that her daughter was dead, and the only thing she wanted was for her body to be found, and for this nightmare of uncertainty to end. I was looking forward to my granddaughter. I wanted to be a grandmother sooner, and I didn't even have time to give her a crib. It's just sitting in the garage in a box. What should I do with it now? Saddened the mother, and did not realize that this became important information for the investigation. According to statistics, a high percentage of crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners, the fathers-to-be. But Mary Smith did not know who the father of her future granddaughter was. Cassandra, as it seemed to her, despite her already realized age, was not married and did not even meet anyone. It was understandable that she had gotten pregnant by a man, but Mary had no information about the potential father of the child. Although, again from the words of her mother, her daughter very often corresponded with someone and called, but the phone number of her interlocutor for some reason was not recorded in the daughter's book, and the mother, of course, did not remember the numbers. She just noticed that it is quite strange to communicate so often with a person and not write down his number. Girls, as it was known, could not keep their relationships in absolute secrecy, and there should be at least one friend with whom Cassandra shared her secrets, and especially if those secrets were related to pregnancy. And such a friend was found. In a conversation with police officers, she revealed that Cassandra had rekindled her relationship with her former boyfriend, Colin Dudley. Yes, their past relationship in 2004 was short-lived, and besides, it's been 15 years since their breakup. It is strange in general that after so much time they remembered each other. As it turned out, Colin himself came out to Cassandra, with whom he once worked on a movie set. In 2014, he found Cassandra on Facebook, wrote some warm words, and confessed that just recently his father died, with whom his wife, Rebecca, had a difficult relationship, and so he had no one to share his grief with. Cassandra, purely because of friendly motives, decided to meet and talk to the ex-boyfriend to calm him down, but the friendly meeting turned into something more. Since 2014, Colin began to live literally on two families, where Cassandra was in the status of mistress. When the young woman found out that she was pregnant, she did not want to inform Colin Dudley, because every time she wanted to admit it to him, she recalled their conversation where Colin said that he absolutely did not want children, and that he was very happy about Rebecca being infertile. The news that he might have a daughter or son could destroy a real family, and Cassandra didn't want to hurt her lover, so she kept the news a secret. Meanwhile, her belly was growing, and it was impossible to hide it under the oversized sweaters, and in order to Colin did not guess anything, Cassandra stopped seeing him. But how to move on? She couldn't hide it for long, and if she lied about having another boyfriend, it would hurt Colin and cause them to break up. Cassandra decided that the bitter truth was better than a sweet lie, so she told Colin over the phone that she was expecting a child with him. Colin was silent for a while, and then he finally said that he was delighted to hear the news. It sounded very strange, but Cassandra concluded that Colin was genuinely pleased. The detective arrived at Colin's house, knocked on the door, and his wife opened it. Deciding that it wasn't quite ethical to talk about a missing mistress in the presence of Colin's legal wife, the detective introduced himself as an old friend of Dudley's. Colin came out, immediately shut the door behind him, and walked away from the house with the detective, though the latter hadn't even introduced himself yet. It was as if he had been waiting for this meeting. "Thank you for not making your credentials public in front of Rebecca. You're a man of honor, a true officer. My compliments to you." Colin spoke in short sentences. "I heard Cassandra is missing. It's weird, bloody weird. I can't even guess where she might have gone. She told me she'd had a big fight with her brother and was really worried about it. I advised her to stop by and make up with him. I don't know if she listened to me or not. That Cassandra and Rob had been in a fight, the detective knew. Rob had told him about it himself. It was nothing serious, just a family misunderstanding, but nevertheless, Cassandra's twin brother had been very upset about it, because the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called him and wanted to come and talk to him, but his proud brother had refused, and now he blamed himself for it. If his sister had come to see him that day, she wouldn't have disappeared. You know, officer, I'm not the nicest person. I think you realize that. Dating my ex-girlfriend in secret from my wife, and for such a long period of time, I'm sure I'll be punished for it in the next world. But the human heart doesn't decide who you fall in love with. In 2014, my father died. He literally hated Rebecca with all his soul, and the feeling was mutual. But he really liked Cassandra. He often remembered her, reproached me for the fact that we broke up with her almost immediately after Christmas. We often fight with our parents, accusing them of not understanding. And then it turns out that it's us, their children, who don't understand, and it hurts. My father was right, of course, and after he died, I just wanted to fulfill one of his wishes, and so I resumed my relationship with Cassandra. Rebecca needed to be broken up with. It was a conversation I kept putting off. You know, this family stuff sucks you dry, so I kept stalling. I've been living a double life for 5 years. It was hell. I had to make excuses for coming home late all the time. To hide it, I'd tell her about some fictitious business trips and even bought a fishing rod, even though I hated fishing, a stupid pastime, and I'd tell Rebecca I was going to the lake while I went to Cassandra's. Before coming home, I'd buy fish at the supermarket for extra convincing, and Rebecca would bake it in the oven and I'd eat it, even though the smell of fish makes me sick. Did you know Cassandra was pregnant? What? Pregnant? By whom? I don't have that information, but she told a close friend of hers that it was from you. That can't be true. She's been adamantly refusing to see me lately, and I guess I understand her and can't blame her for that. Naturally, she was tired of being in the background and wanted a family, which unfortunately I couldn't give her. I guess that the reason she refused to see me was because she had found someone else. When was the last time you saw her? Asked Detective Colin. Honestly, I can't even remember. I think it was about 3 months ago, maybe 4 if you don't count the time we literally ran into her at the mall by chance. But that was fleeting because my wife was in the fitting room, and I just got tired of waiting for her and decided to take a walk to the coffee shop. Tell me, officer, is there any chance you'll find her alive? Dudley asked one last time. We're doing everything we can. Believe me. This was not Colin's last encounter with the detective, even though Cassandra's phone, which was lifted from the bottom of the pond and could not be recovered, but the police requested the details of the calls of the missing person, and it turned out that most likely the unsigned number about which her mother told her belongs to Colin Dudley. Most often Cassandra called him, and even on the day of her disappearance, they called each other. In addition, on that day, the police received CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge, where Cassandra's abandoned car had been found, and on it they saw a strange man who stood out in the crowd of passengers on the platform. He wore a long cloak, gloves, his face was swathed in a scarf, and a hat was placed on his head, the sides of which covered his eyes. It was impossible to make out the face, but the detective said that the man's gait reminded him very much of Colin Dudley. As for the hat, it was almost identical to the one worn by Alex from A Clockwork Orange. After continuing to follow the strange man through the CCTV cameras, the detectives noticed that he literally went into the cafe for a few minutes, then came out of there and went towards the parking lot, where he got into his car and drove away. During all this time, the stranger never showed his face, but they could see the license plate number of the car in which the stranger got into, and the car belonged to Colin Dudley. A unit was sent to his house with a search warrant. The detectives had hoped that Cassandra was alive and in the basement at Dudley's house. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house, but in the closet they found the very hat Colin was trying to cover himself with. They then went down to the basement, but Cassandra was not there, nor was there any evidence of the crime. However, the service dog, which was trained to search by the scent of blood, barked as it sniffed the couch, and that was already a very alarming bell. Colin assured that he had done nothing illegal, that the police simply had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to pin the crime on him, an innocent man. The detective interviewed his wife, who of course was shocked at what was going on in their home, at the accusations against her husband and at the fact that she had been deceived for years. Yes, she could say a lot of things about her husband and her emotions, but when the detective asked her if her husband was capable of murder, she, after thinking about it for a long time, answered in the negative. All the evidence that had been found against Colin wasn't enough to put him in jail, which made Rob and Mary Smith very angry, and the detective was just throwing up his hands. Colin was called in for questioning again. He thought carefully about the crime as he had an alibi for all the allegations. On the morning of August 25th at 6:30 a.m., Colin visited a hardware store where he purchased household cleaning chemicals as well as trash bags. And indeed, the store's cameras confirmed it, but the large trash bags overshadowed this situation. Colin then received a text message from Cassandra that she was almost at his house, but he immediately deleted the message, but it remained in the cell phone carrier's memory, and the police got it from the call and message dump. Also, according to their cell phone billing, the couple did not leave the house that morning for several hours. Colin then turned off his phone, but left his mistress's phone on, most likely by accident, and police saw the entire path of his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. As the police already knew, after the cafe, where he was probably recovering from the murder by washing up in the toilet, Colin got into his car and drove to the pond where he had dumped Cassandra's phone, where the last signal from the cell phone had been received. It was now necessary to search for Cassandra's body. The police, in order to accurately track the route, seized a GPS tracker from Colin's car. The device completely replicated the movement of Cassandra's cell phone signal, but there was new evidence in the case based on his movements the next day. The cops retraced his path that went through the woods, and there in a ravine they spotted a huge trash can tied with ropes. All the ground around it was covered in blood, and it became clear what was in the container. Yeah, they were right. By then, it had been a month since the murder, and identifying the body was difficult. The police were helped by Cassandra's tattoo, which was described in the search notes. Colin was apprehended the same day and charged with murder. Forensics conducted a forensic examination and indicated that death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the examination of the basement of the Dudley house, the police found traces of blood, which could not be completely cleaned. Rebecca knew nothing about the murder. All day she spent in another part of the house, from which no noise in the basement cannot be heard, and she also confirmed that Colin never wanted children, and his story about her infertility, just a fiction. The police took this as a motive for the crime. During the trial, due to the lack of witnesses, physical evidence, such as the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that the murder was committed by Colin Dudley. Then, the court made a deal with the killer that if he pleaded guilty, he would get a lesser sentence. Colin was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and her brother, who still felt guilty that he had not agreed to meet with his sister before her death, were very upset, because the killer would most likely live to see the moment when he could go free. The case of Michelle O'Keefe. Who killed the aspiring actress? The judicial system, unfortunately, is not perfect, even in the most developed and democratic countries. Innocent people sometimes end up serving time for crimes they did not commit, a result of investigative errors or other mishaps. Such injustices usually come to light only when the real culprit is found and proven guilty. But what happens when someone convicted of murder is exonerated years later while the real perpetrator remains unpunished because crucial evidence was lost by the police at the time? The case of young American Michelle O'Keefe, killed under mysterious circumstances in the early 2000s, shook the nation. The investigation lasted several years until the main, and essentially the only suspect, was imprisoned for a significant term. It seemed the case was closed, but after 11 years in prison, the convicted person's innocence was proven. Simultaneously, new details emerged, and another suspect appeared, likely the real murderer. However, more than 2 decades since the student's murder, her parents have become disillusioned with justice, losing hope that the person who took their daughter's life will face fair punishment. Let's delve into this story from the beginning and try to understand where the investigation went wrong and whether these errors could have been avoided. Who was Michelle O'Keefe? Michelle Teresa O'Keefe was born on October 11, 1981, in the quiet town of Hanford, California. The eldest of two children born to Patricia and Michael O'Keefe, Michelle grew up alongside her younger brother Jason. The O'Keefes were a well-off family, owning a profitable local store. Her parents were committed to ensuring their children received a quality education and could fully realize their talents and potential. Michelle was an exemplary student, excelled in sports and ballroom dancing, and was known for her attractive and artistic demeanor. She dreamed of becoming a famous actress, appearing in films, and conquering Hollywood. She possessed the talent, ambition, and attributes necessary for such a feat. After graduating high school with honors, Michelle easily gained admission to one of California's prestigious colleges. She continued her passion for dancing and took evening acting classes. Michelle actively participated in various events, appeared in commercials, and was often seen as an extra in movie and music video shoots. On her 18th birthday, her loving parents gifted her a luxurious blue Ford Mustang with a new Edge design concept. Michelle had always dreamt of owning this car and was overjoyed to receive it as a present. Unfortunately, it was this striking vehicle that likely drew the attention of her killer, leading to the tragic demise of the young Michelle. The Last Shoot. On February 22, 2000, 18-year-old Michelle O'Keefe and her close friend Jennifer Peterson, also an aspiring actress, headed to Palmdale, a scenic town in Los Angeles County, for a video shoot. They were to appear in the latest music video by the popular rock musician Robert James Ritchie, better known by his stage name, Kid Rock. Jennifer and Michelle were extras, dancing and revealing outfits for the video. The shoot consumed nearly the entire day, so by the time they returned to their cars parked at the nearby amusement park, it had almost darkened. Jennifer planned to go home, but Michelle had acting classes that evening. The friends chatted in the parking lot for a few minutes before parting ways. Jennifer walked to her car, while Michelle decided to stay behind to change into her regular clothes. She felt it inappropriate to attend her acting classes in the same outfit she wore for the video shoot, as it was quite provocative. With nowhere private to change on the parking lot, and finding it awkward to do so in her car, Michelle opted to quickly change her clothes right there on the street, next to her car, believing she was alone. This decision, unfortunately, likely proved to be a fatal mistake. Jennifer recalled lingering in the parking lot a while longer, chatting with her boyfriend on the phone. As she started to leave, she noticed the headlights of Michelle's Ford Mustang turning on. Believing Michelle was about to follow her, Jennifer felt reassured that her friend was safe. With loud music playing in her car, the last thing Jennifer saw before turning the corner was what she thought was Michelle's Mustang starting to back out. The murder of an aspiring actress. That evening, a young security guard named Raymond Lee Jennings was on duty at the park and its attractions. Around 9 o'clock, the 25-year-old heard sounds resembling gunshots emanating from the direction of the parking lot, followed by a car alarm. Lacking a firearm and equipped only with a taser, he hesitated to approach alone, knowing he stood little chance against armed assailants. Jennings promptly called his supervisor, Iris Malone, and reported the incident, also alerting the police. Malone arrived within minutes, so before law enforcement reached the scene, she and Jennings decided to cautiously inspect the situation at the parking lot. They immediately noticed a blue car, backed out into the middle lane and halted there with its headlights on and engine running. This was Michelle's Ford Mustang. The car owner was in the driver's seat, motionless and showing no signs of life. Upon closer inspection, Malone and Jennings observed blood inside the car and on Michelle's body, along with several bullet wounds. The driver's door was wide open, and the crime scene appeared horrific. It seemed that Michelle had been chased and initially wounded in the parking lot. She had tried to escape, leapt into her car, and even managed to start it. But the assailant caught up to her and fired several more shots, depriving the student of any chance of survival. Michelle's appearance was quite provocative. She had bright makeup and a tousled hairstyle, styled specifically for the video shoot. She was also wearing regular jeans and a shiny top. Apparently, Michelle had partially changed in the parking lot, as a shiny mini skirt matching the top and a regular t-shirt were found next to her on the passenger seat. One of her shoes was on her foot, while the other lay away on the parking lot, presumably dropped as she dashed to her car. Crime scene investigation. Following the security guard and his supervisor, the first to arrive at the crime scene was the local sheriff's deputy. He noted that the young woman showed no signs of life, but he informed emergency services in case he was mistaken and she still had a chance of being saved. He also recorded the statements of Jennings and Malone. The arriving police officers began a thorough examination of the crime scene, gathering all possible evidence. They found several shell casings on the parking lot and noticed a bullet mark on the asphalt, slightly away from the car. This led to the conclusion that the perpetrator likely first fired a shot into the ground to intimidate the victim, then shot at her directly, as evidenced by bloodstains on the parking lot. The victim had run towards her car but didn't manage to escape, as the assailant caught up to her and fired several more shots. She died almost instantly from extensive injuries and significant blood loss. In total, 5 shell casings were found on the ground. Experts concluded that all shots were fired from the same weapon, but the bullets significantly differed from each other, raising questions that needed prompt answers. Also found on the ground was an earring, presumably dropped by the victim. Later, her friend identified this item, confirming it belonged to Michelle. However, the second earring was not found on or near the victim. This detail, unfortunately, was initially deemed insignificant and was forgotten for a long time, which turned out to be a crucial oversight. Theories and speculations initially, close relatives and friends of the murdered young woman were interviewed. They unanimously asserted that Michelle had no enemies or ill-wishers. Known for her sociable, open, and very friendly nature, everyone who knew her spoke highly of the student. Thus, a personal motive for the murder was almost immediately ruled out. The next theory considered was an unsuccessful robbery or carjacking attempt of her new vehicle. However, this seemed doubtful. The only personal item missing was her mobile phone, which she had used just minutes before the attack to tell her mother that the filming was over and she was heading back. Michelle's purse, containing her wallet and a couple of $100 in cash, was found at the passenger's feet. Police speculated that in the confusion and darkness, the assailant might have failed to notice the purse, and fearing the gunshot sounds had attracted security, didn't search the car. This could also explain why the carjacking attempt was aborted. It seemed the attacker initially did not intend to shoot, but only to threaten her with the weapon, but something went wrong. Another theory proposed that Michelle might have been mistaken for a lady of the night due to her appearance. She was dressed provocatively, with heavy makeup and high heels. It was possible the criminal noticed her on her way to the parking lot and followed her. In the darkness, he might have approached her with ill intentions, but upon being firmly rejected, he took her life in retaliation. Supporting this theory was the fact that her top was partially pulled down, exposing her left breast. This suggested that the attacker was likely a man. However, it was also possible that her thin, strapped clothing slipped during the scuffle, chase, or as the frightened, wounded young woman attempted to get into her car. The sole suspect. The first person interrogated was Raymond, the security guard on duty at the parking lot, who was believed to be the sole witness of the incident. He confirmed hearing gunshots and a car alarm around 9 in the evening, immediately reporting it to his supervisor and calling the police. Raymond noted he saw no one on the parking lot before or after the shots. No one fled or left the scene in the minutes following. Given that the time was still early and the area was popular, it's plausible that others nearby might have seen or heard something. Police became interested in Raymond's background and discovered that, despite his relatively young age, he was the head of a large family, raising 5 children. He served in the California National Guard and aspired to be a law enforcer, working while also studying at the police academy, gaining certain knowledge and skills. As the main witness to the murder, Raymond sought to help the investigation, naively thinking that this experience would be beneficial for his academy exams. When investigators asked him to present his version of events during an interrogation, Raymond detailed his perspective on how things might have unfolded. Being a top student, he meticulously considered all details, trying to piece together a coherent picture. He hypothesized where the attacker and victim might have been during the initial gunshot and how subsequent events unfolded. He based his story on the evidence, the location of shell casings, blood droplets, the victim's belongings, and the car. He also estimated the shooting distances. At that time, Raymond didn't realize that he was unwittingly digging his own grave. He just wanted to assist the investigation and be useful. However, the detectives investigating the case drew their own conclusions, suggesting that such detailed knowledge could only be possessed by the murderer himself. Since there were no other suspects, the security guard was charged with the girl's murder. New witnesses. Several weeks after Michelle's murder, a 17-year-old African-American girl named Victoria Richardson came to the police's attention. She had been in the parking lot on that tragic evening with her 18-year-old boyfriend and a couple of friends. They had been horseback riding in the park and returned to the parking lot after dark on February 22nd. According to Victoria, they were in their car, music blaring, preparing to leave when they heard unusual sounds. Initially, they mistook them for firecrackers or fireworks, paying little attention, but then realized they were gunshots. Victoria recalled seeing, just a minute and a half earlier, a man in a security guard's uniform walking towards a parked blue Ford Mustang nearby. After the strange sounds and the activation of a car alarm, the friends got out of their car and saw the Mustang, which had rolled backwards and stopped, no longer moving. Reportedly, they saw the security guard again, who warned them of an armed person on the parking lot and advised caution. Hearing this, the group hurried back into their car and cautiously left the parking lot, trying not to draw attention. When asked to describe the guard they interacted with, Victoria mentioned he was a middle-aged, heavy-set African-American man. This description matched another employee who had worked in the parking lot the day before Raymond's shift. This second guard was immediately detained and questioned. He had a solid alibi as he was at a family gathering at the time of the murder, confirmed by about 20 people. Therefore, despite inconsistencies in the witnesses' accounts, Jennings remained the sole suspect. Prolonged investigation and arrest. After 5 years, the investigation insisted that Raymond was the killer, partly because his knowledge and skills in forensics could convincingly deflect suspicion away from himself. However, evidence and witness testimonies didn't align coherently. The crime itself appeared irrational and odd, with no apparent motive for the suspect. Raymond had his own legally acquired pistol, which wasn't with him on the night of the murder. He presented this weapon to the police, and forensic analysis confirmed that the bullets weren't fired from it. Investigators speculated that he might have hidden unregistered firearms, but this theory was unsubstantiated. Meanwhile, the murdered girl's parents conducted their own investigation, hiring private detectives. Patricia and Michael felt the law enforcement was inadequately handling the case or simply inactive. They actively engaged in interviews and TV appearances, sharing their story to pressure the authorities. They were convinced that Raymond was responsible for Michelle's death and should be punished. Although there were no strong reasons to detain him initially, Raymond went to Iraq for military service, where he stayed for almost 5 years. Upon returning to the United States, he was immediately arrested and jailed. Raymond consented to a polygraph test but failed, which worked against him. Unable to post the $1 million bail set, he had to remain in custody for about a year while investigators and his defense prepared for trial. Trial and verdict. According to the prosecution, the security guard, Raymond, mistook Michelle in her revealing outfit for a sex worker and followed her to her car. After she rebuffed his advances, a scorned Raymond opened fire and then radioed his boss about the incident, stating he wouldn't approach the crime scene. The defense highlighted that the murder weapon was never found, either on the day or later. There were no DNA traces, fingerprints, or any signs of Raymond's presence at the crime scene. Interestingly, epithelial particles under the victim's nails did not match Raymond's DNA. Instead of probing whose DNA it was, The investigators convinced the court it was incidental contamination, unrelated to the case. Raymond's personal belongings, car, locker, and home were thoroughly searched for the murder weapon, but a gunpowder residue test on his clothing was strangely not conducted at the time. Notably, Raymond resigned a few days after the incident due to threats from unknown individuals and returned his work uniform, which police received only a week later. It was claimed that he had thoroughly washed the uniform before returning it, thus erasing any gunpowder traces. However, traces of sweat and dust on the uniform indicated it hadn't been washed. Victoria Richardson, the aforementioned witness, testified in court, stating she saw a guard at the parking lot during the shooting. But she didn't specify who she saw, citing darkness and possible confusion. The prosecution seized upon her testimony as evidence of Raymond's guilt. The jury deliberated for a week but couldn't reach a unanimous decision. As a result, a new trial was scheduled to give both sides time to prepare. In February 2009, 11 out of 12 jurors found Raymond guilty of murder. In December 2009, the Supreme Court convicted Raymond Jennings of murder under aggravating circumstances, sentencing him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Raymond maintained his innocence, asserting in his final statement that he had no remorse since he didn't commit the crime. However, Michelle's parents and brother were convinced of his guilt and satisfied with the verdict. New trial and acquittal. Raymond Jennings spent nearly 11 years incarcerated, losing hope in justice as his appeals were repeatedly denied. However, in late 2015, renowned attorney Jeffrey Ehrlich and his son Clinton, a law student at the time, took interest in his case. They revisited the case files and found numerous errors, inconsistencies, and blatant violations in the evidence and trial proceedings. The Ehrlichs believed Raymond was wrongfully convicted and set out to prove his innocence. They compiled all evidence and appealed to the department responsible for reviewing convictions. Specifically, they pointed out that Raymond's uniform showed no gunpowder residue or blood splatter, only sweat and dust, indicating it wasn't washed. Additionally, they noted that Raymond was unarmed, and detectives failed to consider other individuals present at the park that evening. New reports suggested the murder was a spontaneous act, likely a botched robbery attempt. Moreover, Victoria Richardson, the main witness, and her boyfriend, both with a criminal history, were serving time for armed robbery at the time of the final trial, but were never considered suspects. The mix of different cartridges fired from the same gun, unusual for someone with military training, hinted at a street gang style. Richardson and her boyfriend were part of such a gang, but since they weren't initially investigated for Michelle's murder, many leads were irretrievably lost. Notably, the boyfriend wore an earring resembling the one found at the crime scene on the night of the murder. Despite failing to prove the criminal couple's involvement in the aspiring actress's murder, the Ehrlichs successfully established Jennings's innocence. Consequently, the former guard was factually acquitted, a significant distinction from legal or presumptive innocence. Sergeant Raymond Jennings was released from prison after nearly 11 years for a crime he didn't commit. The judge noted that jurors weren't informed about the presence of gang members at the crime scene that evening. In March 2017, Jennings received a $500,000 compensation for the wrongful conviction. A devout man, he later stated that God had heard his prayers and justice had prevailed. Only Michelle O'Keefe's parents remained deeply upset, believing the man they thought killed their daughter was wrongly freed. Having also lost their son in a car accident, the O'Keefes divorced, clinging to the belief that their daughter's supposed killer had been punished. Despite the case remaining unsolved, the likelihood of anyone being held accountable for Michelle's murder is now extremely low. On Saturday morning, August 19, 2017, Norberta Greywind looked at her 22-year-old pregnant daughter struggling to climb the stairs to her third-floor neighbor's apartment complex. Savannah was 8 months pregnant. August had been unusually hot, and she could barely walk on her swollen legs. A few hours later, William Hahn, the boyfriend of Brooke Cruz, the same neighbor who had invited Savannah over, came up the same stairs. When he entered the apartment, he found Brooke scrubbing the bathroom, Savannah's bloody, shredded body lying on the floor, and a basin with a baby in it on top of the toilet lid. Upon seeing William, Brooke picked up the infant and held it out to him with the words, "This is our baby. This is our family. Please help me." Against any healthy logic, William helped clean up the blood, carry bags of bloody towels and clothes out of the apartment, wrap bags around Savannah's body, securing them with duct tape and ropes, and later dispose of the corpse. Today's story is about the tragic intersection of the lives of two contrasting couples. The dark one, with a sticky, heavy, irresponsible, and unhealthy past defining their present, and the light one, loving, easy, and open. The result, broken families, and the death that accompanied the birth. The day after the deed, William Hahn announced to his co-workers that his spouse had given birth to a little girl named Phoenix. In some macabre irony, the couple who took Savannah's life and daughter away from her named the child after the mythological bird with the ability to die and be reborn. Later in the interview, Brooke's boyfriend would describe his days with Hazley, as her family would call the girl, as beautiful days. "That baby made me a happy little family man for 2 days. It's been great. I never thought I'd ever experience that again." Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995 in Burke County, North Dakota. Savannah's father is an ordinary white American and her mother is from the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. The girl had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and the younger sister Kayla. The parents, Norberta and Joe, were very proud of their children. The family lived in Fargo, North Dakota until Savannah was 9 years old. Then, in 2005, they moved to Spirit Lake Reservation, Spirit Lake, a Native American Indian place in the eastern part of the state. Savannah adored nature and animals, especially horses. On the reservation, the girl met Ashton Mayton. The couple met when Savannah was 15 years old, and since then, they have not parted. When it was time for the young people to go to college, the family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found a job caring for the elderly at a nursing home, studying to become a nurse, and preparing to take the exam in September. By this time, Savannah was a happy young woman expecting her firstborn. She and Ashton had found an apartment, put down a deposit, and planned to move into their own family nest in early September. For now, Savannah was staying with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. It was in this building on the 3rd floor that 38-year-old Brooke Cruz and 33-year-old William Hone rented an apartment. No one is born evil. A person is the result of experiences that make them who they are. Brooke Cruz has created a woman within herself capable of such gruesome murder. Wanting to find wholeness through accepting all sides of her personality, she nurtured a dark side step by step that she couldn't control. Perhaps there are 2 different personalities within each of us, darkness and light. I believe we are predestined to have dark and light thought processes that manifest as personalities. One of them is socially destroyed quite early on. But is that a good thing? Brooke wrote in one of her pieces, "Ever since she was a child, Brooke was drawn to mysticism and found a special beauty in the crimes of serial killers and high IQ maniacs. As an adult, she had already studied the psychology of criminals professionally and strived to learn to think like them so she could understand them. Brooke said that if Ted Bundy came to see her, she would definitely help him. But Brooke Cruz, alas, was not a healthy, stable person herself. All the lived information was downloaded into the personality, which was characterized by impulsive behavior, anxious avoidance, irascibility, frequent changes of partners and places of work, inability to finish what she had started. The young woman tried to fight it, made discipline lists, and even followed them for a while, but eventually fell off again. By the time she was 38, she was overwhelmed by depression, physical illness, exhaustion from unhealthy relationships that included regular physical abuse, and a disturbing fear of losing her partner because she couldn't get pregnant and give birth. Brooke couldn't take it anymore. Darkness and light mingled. Killing a pregnant woman was seen as one way to get the infant she wanted. After her arrest, Brooke's apartment was left with a stack of books ranging from clinical, criminal, forensic, and legal psychology to obstetrics. In a desk drawer, she found notes listing birthing kit items such as scissors, blades, clamps, and gloves.
an infant cardiopulmonary resuscitation bag, and the hormone oxytocin. Brooke Lynn Cruz grew up in Florida's Bradenton, Sarasota neighborhood, where her mother, Paula Nelson, still lives, according to Christmas cards. Her parents divorced, and 7 children, including Brooke, were left to live with their mother. According to the recollections of one of her sisters, the family lived quite well, according to diary entries Brooke kept throughout her later life. She had a difficult childhood, which she tries hard to forget. Transition age changed the caring, open-minded girl, made her testy but not aggressive. Brooke became a troubled teenager, and she was the only one of all the children who decided to move in with her father, whom her mother called a professional criminal. Life with her father didn't work out, and she found herself in and out of foster homes. From that point on, the siblings pretty much lost touch with Brooke. They only learn that Brooke is the mother of at least 7 children from a news story about a shocking crime. At the age of 15, Brooke met Aaron Edwards. In 1995, when she was about 17, she gave birth to a child in Pinellas County, Florida, left the infant with the father, and moved away. A court ordered the mother to pay child support, but Brooke did not honor the court order. She will remember her daughter when she turns 14, and their communication will be limited to a few Facebook messages. In the evenings, Brooke worked as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant and as a sales representative and animal specialist at the Petland Pet Store in Bradenton, Florida. In early 2002, Brooke, 23, was jailed in Missouri for falsifying documents but was released on parole. On August 31, 2002, she was arrested again and sent to jail in Hidalgo County, Texas for parole violation. In 2006, at the age of 27, Brooke married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota. The young woman managed to give birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant in her husband's carpentry shop. The marriage, in which Brooke cheated on her husband, lasted only 3 years. The couple divorced in June 2009. The custody of the children, according to the documents, became the father, and Brooke left for California without explanation. The only thing she did carefully and diligently throughout her life was to keep diaries and record all the events that happened to her. After the terrible crime, the entries became available to the press. The diaries told of a string of lovers, home births, and abortions. There was a common point in all the stories. The relationships began with heart-shaped marks around the edges, but after a while, the entries about the men changed. Each of them started playing intellectual games with me, making me feel that I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, Brooke wrote. It's impossible to say with certainty whether Brooke chose such guys on purpose or whether any of her relationships went through such trials as a result of internal problems. However, she absolutely believed that Carl was bullying her and making her look like a bad, promiscuous mother, and this fact was perceived by her as emotionally traumatizing. However, despite this perception, she returns to her now ex-husband's house after a trip to California, registers on a dating site, and begins to study psychology in earnest. On the dating site tagged, the young woman meets Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia, and decides to move to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, in an argument that erupted over a child custody issue, Brooke grabbed a knife and attacked her ex-husband. Police arrested the woman and filed criminal charges. Brooke denied the knife attack, but chose not to wait for a court hearing and fled to Australia on false immigration papers, where she married Andrew. The Australian marriage lasted exactly 6 months. Andrew found out about her American past, husband, children, and fake immigration papers. After discovering the truth, his wife, according to Andrew, began threatening him with arrest for aiding and abetting, causing him to even go to the police and tell them everything just in case. The marriage is remembered by Andrew for the huge amount of talk about maniacs. He would later reveal that as early as 2012, Brooke was already obsessed with crime. She studied psychology and nursing, did her thesis on serial killers from her words. She was always reading books about maniacs and crime and could tell you anything about them. I thought she became more and more aggressive as time went on. In total, it took 6 months and 10 days from the time she arrived until she returned to the U.S. in October 2012. On September 22, 2012, Brooke made a diary entry where she wrote that she had changed significantly for the better. After returning from Australia, she was engaged in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. She may have had a chance for a new life if she reconciled with Andrew Murray, but in late 2012, Brooke met 28-year-old William Hone, who had been convicted of child abuse a few months earlier after he brought his son to the hospital in January 2011 with a fractured skull near his right ear. Brooke falls in love with this guy who is twice divorced, has 2 kids, doesn't pay child support, has anger issues, and a court order for no contact with his children. Brooke is full of energy and desire to be her new self, take the kids, and take steps in that direction, and finds a job. In 2013, Brooke turns a hobby into a profession and enrolls at Minnesota State University in Moorhead, where she takes courses such as social behavior, physiological psychology, cognitive theory, psychology of deviant behavior, and directed research. She is particularly interested in the psychology of serial killers. The newly minted student wrote a paper on them and received the highest grade. Only her personal life clouds the picture. The relationship with William began beautifully. "We have such a relationship with him, which is nice for children. We're loving. We don't yell at each other. We're affectionate and kind," Brooke said. But over time, the relationship turned into codependency, the joint use of alcohol and illegal substances. Brooke thought she was doing well, but felt worse and worse. She started avoiding her children, changed jobs because she couldn't get along with the staff, and became more and more immersed in her psychological research into the darker sides of humanity. On December 23, 2014, she lost her custody battle. Judge Waldemar of the Otter Tail County Courthouse granted temporary sole physical and sole legal custody of the children to their father, Carl. That same day, Brooke suffered a panic attack and was taken to the hospital emergency room with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, according to medical records. Years later, after her trial for the murder, she would say it was the events in 2014 that were the turning point in her life, when she lost the ability to control her impulses and evaluate her actions. But what those events were, Brooke did not elaborate. In January 2015, in her diary will appear entry, "I feel like I started this relationship with a purse full of love coins, and slowly but surely this purse is empty, and I just have nothing to give. Our intimacy is not the same as before. About once a week he makes time for me. The intimacy lasts about 7 to 15 minutes. He doesn't care at all about my satisfaction."
Brooke complained of inattention and became increasingly withdrawn. 5 months later, she was diagnosed with gallbladder disease, and physical and psychological deterioration set in. Brooke practically stopped leaving the house. In May 2016, police responded to a call. William Hahn had brutally beaten his girlfriend in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching Brooke. 6 months later, police came again on a neighbor's call and found Hahn in Brooke's apartment. He pleaded guilty to violating the restraining order. And then they got back together, and there was no longer a healthy moment in the relationship. Brooke was unable to have children after having an abortion in 2011. William, on the other hand, constantly demanded a child from her. In early 2017, after another fight, Brooke lied to Hahn about the pregnancy to keep him from leaving, and even emailed a fake ultrasound picture and a picture of a positive pregnancy test. She found a recording of some random baby's heartbeat online and showed it to her partner, saying it was the heartbeat of their future child. In August 2017, they had another big fight, by which time it was obvious that there was no pregnancy, but since William had already told everyone around about the future paternity and did not want to look like a laughingstock, he literally demanded a child from his girlfriend, mentioning the pregnant neighbor 3 floors below. Brooke Cruz would later tell police officers that she took William's demand as an ultimatum and a desire to take the baby away from Savannah, even though he didn't say so directly. Brooke had medical knowledge, and she set about compiling a list of what she needed to induce labor. By now, she was used to anticipating and doing whatever her young lover wanted her to do. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke knocked on the door of a downstairs apartment and offered Savannah $20 for serving as a model for a dress Brooke was supposedly sewing. Savannah accepted. Before going upstairs to her neighbor's apartment, Savannah ordered a pizza, expecting to grab a bite when she got home an hour later to drive her younger brother to work. The mom-to-be didn't return by the planned time. The brother went upstairs on his own around 2:30 in the afternoon. He heard the sound of a sewing machine, but no one opened the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked on the door. Brooke yelled out that they were still working on the dress. Savannah was trying it on, and that was why no one could come to the door. Norberta drove her son to work herself. When she returned home, she found the pizza untouched, texted her daughter a few times, and after getting no response, went upstairs. A neighbor opened the door and explained that Savannah had long since left as soon as they finished their fitting. An anxious Norberta went downstairs to her apartment and looked around. Her shoes, purse, car keys, and belongings were all left in the apartment. Savannah couldn't go for a walk because the heat and swelling made it painful and difficult for her to walk. Norberta called Ashton, hoping he was the one who had picked up her daughter, but the young man replied that she wasn't answering him either. The worried mother called the police and began driving around the streets looking for her pregnant daughter, who may have suddenly become ill. I was driving and I thought, well, if she had gone somewhere, I would have found her nearby, but deep down I knew she hadn't gone anywhere. Later that day, police searched Brooke and William's apartment because it was Savannah's last known location. The landlady welcomed them in and did not obstruct them, but the police, lacking a warrant, did not look in closets or behind closed doors. The police department explained to the family that Savannah was of age and old enough to make her own decisions without informing family members. Because there was no evidence that any crime had occurred in or near the home, investigators concluded that the young woman had gone somewhere voluntarily. Savannah's family saw the indifference with which the department's officers were working, and it was very upsetting to them. The police returned to search the apartment 2 more times and came out empty-handed. William Hohn would later testify that during one of the searches, he hid the infant in a suitcase and Savannah's body in a dresser from which all the shelves had been removed. 2 days after the brutal murder, the couple would drive the dresser with Savannah's body to a bridge over the Red River and dump it in the water. On August 23, 2017, William's co-workers told police that he had blabbed about having a baby at home. That same day, residents of the apartment building heard a baby crying from apartment #5 and immediately notified police. The information received allowed the officers to obtain a warrant and return to the familiar apartment already, with a serious, thorough search, during which a live newborn baby girl was found. Brooke didn't hold back and revealed that Savannah herself had given her the baby 2 days after her disappearance. According to her, Savannah didn't want this baby, and that day when she came to help with sewing a dress, she asked Brooke how she could induce labor on her own. Then she left and showed up 2 days later at 3 a.m. with the baby in her arms and handed him to Brooke. The couple was arrested and Savannah was reported missing. The baby was taken to a local hospital and placed in the temporary custody of Cass County Social Services. A few days later, a DNA test confirmed parentage, and the girl was reunited with her father. For 3 more days, police and hundreds of local residents combed the valley looking for Savannah. Please check your property, buildings, garages, outbuildings for any signs of entry or any indication that someone has been there. Landlords, please check your vacant apartments that you may have for any signs of entry or evidence that someone has been there. If you are willing to check your dumpsters, we ask the public to help with that, Chief Todd said at the press conference. On August 27th, 8 days after Savannah's disappearance, fishermen came across a body wrapped in plastic on the Red River near Harwood. Savannah was identified by a tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." On August 28th, Brooke Cruz and William Hohn were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to police. The couple began to confess. Brooke said she instigated the altercation by accusing pregnant Savannah of stealing mail and mistreating her cat. The verbal argument turned into a physical scuffle, and Brooke pushed her. Savannah, falling, hit her head on the bathroom sink and lost consciousness. Brooke then took a knife and removed the baby, making a cut from hip to hip. Savannah went in and out of consciousness as she did so. Under questioning, Brooke confirmed that William Hohn did not know of the impending plan. According to her, William came home, went into the bathroom, saw Savannah, and asked if she was alive. Brooke replied that she didn't know and asked for something to do. William left the bathroom briefly and then returned in his underwear holding a rope, which he used to strangle Savannah. In doing so, he said that if she had been breathing up to this point, she was definitely dead now. Next, Brooke said, the two of them scrubbed the floor and walls and stuffed the lifeless body into a bathroom closet. When the police knocked on the door, Brooke tried to remain calm and not worry. The officers searched the apartment but couldn't find anything. They did not have a search warrant, so the search was superficial, and the officers could not look in closets and dressers. According to the perpetrator, the child during both searches that day was under a blanket on their bed next to William. The girl was very calm and did not cry, so she was not discovered. At the time of the third inspection, August 20th, the body had already been placed inside the dresser and the infant was hidden in a suitcase. In the early morning hours of August 21st, they took the dresser down the stairs and loaded it into their Jeep Cherokee, drove it to the river and disposed of it. William Hone denied participating in the crime. He admitted only to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement in order to cover up the crime. Brooke and William were set bail at $2 million, to which William remarked that it was an unrealistic and unreasonable amount for any ordinary person. Surprisingly, he apparently thought he deserved something reasonable after Brooke Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. William's participation in the crime was not proven. During the trial, it was also revealed that Brooke's cellmate named Jennifer Robinson testified against her. According to the inmate's claim, Brooke mentioned that she was the one who strangled Savannah with a rope because she learned about Savannah and William's affair and thought that Savannah's child might have come from him. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William, finding him not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. However, on October 30th, 2018, because he had pleaded guilty to kidnapping himself, he was sentenced to life in prison. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. On October 7, 2019, the sentencing review trial concluded. Judge Olson, who had originally sentenced William to life in prison, stated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he was still going to give him the harshest sentence possible at this time, which was 20 years in prison. Given that William has already spent 775 days behind bars, he will have to serve more than 17 more years of his 20-year sentence. Baby Hazley remained unharmed despite such an unnatural delivery. The girl is now 6 years old and goes to kindergarten. Savannah's parents and the girl's father share joint custody. The grandparents maintain a public Facebook page where they post updates on how the granddaughter is living and what she is doing. The case has become a high-profile case. Norberta is convinced that her daughter's disappearance was not taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. I feel that her disappearance was not taken as seriously as the disappearance of a white woman. I've lived in Fargo almost my whole life, and I've seen how differently Native Americans are treated. After Savannah's death, Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced a bill called Savannah's Law, which was signed into law in October 2020. The bill aims to combat violence against Native American women by improving collaboration between federal, state, and tribal authorities. Norberta commented on the passage of the bill, "It's sad that my daughter had to die for people to take Native Americans seriously."